Picture this for a second. You're sitting peacefully at home, enjoying a normal afternoon, when suddenly two men dressed almost exactly like police officers start pounding violently on your front door. The only problem? They aren't actual cops. They're representatives from the HOA, and they're about to make the worst decision of their entire lives. This is the unbelievable story of a homeowner who refused to back down after his family was threatened inside their own house. The incident exploded online, triggering heated arguments everywhere about HOA overreach, abuse of authority, and the right to protect your home. It all started on what should have been an ordinary quiet afternoon. A homeowner will call David was relaxing inside when an aggressive banging echoed through the house. The knocking wasn't normal. It was loud, angry, and relentless. David walked over carefully and glanced through the peephole. Standing outside were two men wearing uniforms that looked disturbingly close to police gear. They had tactical-style belts, shiny badges, dark clothing, and the kind of posture meant to intimidate people at first glance. But something immediately felt wrong. David chose not to answer the door. In his mind, if there was a real emergency, actual officers would identify themselves properly instead of pounding like debt collectors. But the banging didn't stop. In fact, it got worse. Each hit against the door sounded more aggressive than the last, rattling the frame hard enough to make the entire house tense up. David's wife, Sarah, started getting nervous. She worried there might actually be an emergency outside, maybe a fire nearby or some serious neighborhood issue. Despite David warning her not to, Sarah carefully unlocked the door and opened it just a few inches to ask what was going on. The second that door cracked open, everything spiraled out of control. One of the men shoved forward immediately, forcing the door wider and partially stepping inside the house. He began loudly barking orders, claiming they were there to enforce an HOA violation. The horrifying offense? Their trash cans had apparently been visible from the street. That was it. Sarah stood there stunned that something so minor had escalated into what felt like a raid. She tried explaining they had simply forgotten to move the bins and were about to bring them in anyway. But the men didn't care. They kept shouting over her about neighborhood regulations and HOA authority like they owned the property. The situation escalated in seconds. Sarah tried to push the door closed and demand they leave, but one of the fake officers suddenly snapped. In a disgusting burst of aggression, he slapped her hard across the face. The sound echoed through the house. David heard it from the next room, and in that instant everything changed. The moment he realized his wife had just been assaulted inside their own home, every thought about keeping things calm disappeared. Something inside him switched immediately from cautious homeowner to protector. Without panic and without hesitation, David turned and walked straight to his bedroom. He opened his gun safe and retrieved his legally owned Smith & Wesson M&P pistol. David wasn't reckless. He was a licensed firearm owner who believed strongly in responsibility and safety. He had never imagined he would actually need to retrieve his weapon for self-defense. But this was no longer some petty disagreement with the HOA. This had become a violent home intrusion. Keeping the firearm pointed safely downward in a low-ready position, David walked back toward the front entrance. Meanwhile, the two HOA enforcers were still standing there berating Sarah, completely intoxicated by their own authority. Then they saw David. The transformation was instant. The yelling stopped cold. Their aggressive body language vanished immediately. The confidence drained from their faces so fast it was almost unbelievable. Suddenly, these two men who had been pretending to act like law enforcement realized they were facing a very real consequence for forcing their way into someone's home. David never raised a pistol. He never pointed it at anyone. He never screamed or threatened them. He didn't need to. The calm expression on his face, combined with the sight of the firearm, was enough to completely shatter their bravado. David looked directly at them and spoke in a firm, controlled voice. "Get out of my house. Now." Just moments earlier, the two men had acted untouchable. Now they were stumbling backward over themselves, trying to retreat through the doorway as fast as possible. They nearly tripped in their rush to escape the property. Within seconds, they were gone. And deep down, they knew they had crossed a line they never should have crossed in the first place. Right after the two men fled the property, David immediately contacted the actual police. He carefully explained everything that had happened from start to finish. The fake law enforcement appearance, the aggressive pounding on the door, the forced entry into his home, and the assault on his wife. When real officers arrived at the scene, they treated the situation with extreme seriousness. Impersonating law enforcement is not a joke. In many places, it's considered a major felony offense, and when combined with trespassing, assault, and unlawful entry into a private residence, the HOA enforcers suddenly found themselves facing consequences far beyond a neighborhood dispute. The officers interviewed David and Sarah thoroughly while documenting the entire incident. After reviewing the details, they assured David that he had acted within his legal rights while defending his home and family. Under the castle doctrine laws in their state, homeowners were allowed to protect themselves against unlawful threats inside their residence. The police made it clear that David had not recklessly escalated the situation. He never pointed a firearm at anyone, never threatened to shoot, and never chased the men after they retreated. He had simply displayed the weapon in order to stop an active threat inside his home. But the story didn't stop there. Once news about the confrontation spread throughout the neighborhood, outrage exploded across the community. Residents were furious when they learned HOA representatives had dressed like police officers and physically assaulted a homeowner's wife over something as ridiculous as visible trash cans. The HOA board was immediately flooded with angry phone calls, emails, and complaints from residents demanding answers. People were horrified to discover their HOA fees had apparently been funding wannabe enforcers who thought intimidation and violence were acceptable ways to handle minor rule violations. The backlash was immediate. The two men involved were fired from their HOA enforcement positions almost instantly. Soon after, they were hit with serious legal charges connected to the incident. Their little power trip had spiraled into something that threatened both their careers and their freedom. Before long, the story exploded online. Videos discussing the case began circulating everywhere, turning the incident into a viral debate across social media platforms and news channels. The situation touched on several issues people already felt passionately about: HOA overreach, self-defense rights, personal freedoms, and protecting one's family inside their own home. Many people viewed David as a hero. To them, he was simply a man who reacted exactly the way a responsible husband and homeowner should when faced with violent intruders. Supporters praised how calm he remained under pressure, instead of escalating the violence. He used the presence of his legally owned firearm to stop the threat before the situation became even worse. Of course, not everyone agreed completely. The story sparked heated debates online about firearms and self-defense laws. Some people questioned whether introducing a gun into the situation was necessary at all. But despite the arguments, many legal experts and commentators pointed out that David's response closely matched what responsible defensive firearm use is supposed to look like. He didn't go searching for confrontation. He didn't act recklessly. He didn't threaten anybody unnecessarily. He used the visible presence of the weapon to force aggressive intruders to back down and leave. The fake officers were clearly the aggressors in the situation. David was defending his family. In many ways, the incident became a powerful reminder about several important realities. First, people should understand their legal rights, especially when it comes to defending themselves and their homes. Laws like the Castle Doctrine exist for situations exactly like this. Second, the story highlighted what responsible firearm ownership actually looks like. David wasn't some hot-headed man desperate for conflict. He was a prepared citizen who understood the enormous responsibility that comes with owning a weapon. When the moment came, he used it carefully and with restraint. He treated it like a shield protecting his family, not a weapon for intimidation or revenge. And finally, the entire situation became a warning for organizations like overreaching HOAs that believe they can bully, intimidate, or control residents through fear. Power built on intimidation is fragile. The second those two men crossed the line and slapped Sarah inside her own home, this stopped being about trash cans or HOA rules. They violated something much deeper. They attacked the safety and sanctity of a family's home. And they learned very quickly that some lines should never be crossed. In the end, David's calm courage sent a message that resonated with millions of people watching the story unfold online. A person's home is their castle, and they have every right to defend it. So what do you think? Did David handle the situation the right way? What would you have done if something like this happened to your family? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Stories like this always spark fascinating discussions, and there's definitely a lot to unpack here. Thanks for watching, and if you found this story interesting, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more content like this. Stay safe out there.